Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos and welcome to this Atal'Dazar plus 24. I did a little bit over a month ago now that I recorded. I'm just now getting around to putting some commentary over. So first thing you might notice when I did this is our tank here, Nerf Clap, is Method NA Gamer. Desert Dust is also, that's Yoda. Method NA, he plays Rogue for Method NA in their MDI stuff, so very stacked team here. Myself, two of them, Kinbote, who's a huge rogue that has like 5,000 item levels and a socket on all his pieces of gear. And Venter, who's a big healer that we actually just recruited to my guild. Pretty happy about that. Who also does very high keys. So stacked group. This is from a little while ago. So this is actually the last bolstering week before right now when this is being recorded. Bolstering Grievous Tyrannical. Atal'Dazar. So we're going to start off by heading over here to the left side of the place. We're going to pull these two packs together and fight them at the same time. Now these packs, normally the Juggernaut is a little bit of a problem. So in order to stop the Juggernaut from charging, you'll see here Venter has run up the stairs here. And because of that, the Juggernaut is going to target him and try and charge him, but can't find a path to run up there. So we'll just stay in the group. Then we're just focusing down the Augur, the Juggernaut, the Confessor. Those ones are going down. There are two Juggernauts. Both of them are just not doing anything effective to getting up to Venter. The Confessor, we're just stopping the casts. The Confessor, you need to kick the Mantle of Bwonsamdi. You can actually stun or gouge or whatever the other cast, the Mending Word, and it won't recast, but the Mantle of Bwonsamdi will. So you want to just assign one person, like one rogue can handle a Confessor entirely, and can do all the kicks on, like can gouge the Mending Word and kick the Mantle of Bwonsamdi, and then every other kick in your group can be on the Augur. As you'll see here, I have a focus bar there that's I'm kicking the Augur. The Confessor is being taken care of by somebody else. I don't remember exactly who in this run, but yeah, that's one of the upsides of being an Outlaw Rogue is you can just cycle between gouge and kick and take care of a Confessor entirely and save more kicks for the rest. You'll see there the Augur got a Fiery Enchant tick off. If you're quick, you can actually stop that from ticking at all, which is very valuable. But we scuffed it a little bit this time. Didn't end up succeeding at doing that, and so one tick got off that did quite a bit of damage. It wasn't the end of the world though. We survived here. And we killed these things off. One thing you also notice is Venter had rooted that patrolling Confessor. That's actually a really good play. Earlier when the Confessor was over here, it was rooted. And then as soon as it gets into combat, it's going to cast a spell on itself, but that stopped it from patrolling back to the side that we didn't want it to be on. And then the root doesn't end up being a downside because it just dispels itself and runs over to you anyways. So that's where we get our starting percent here. And now we're going to do a snap strategy. So you'll see Venter. Or not Venter, Nerf just runs in on the little pillar over there, the ledge. I'm going to sap the Sky Screamer because we don't want to bolster that. And then we have two sword packs. I'm going to Tricks Nerf, and I'm going to attack these swords, and they're all going to teleport to him because they can't find a path to him, so they'll snap over there. This strategy is allowed by Blizzard in the MDI. It's not bannable or anything. Obviously it's like a bug, but it's allowed, so we do it. I don't know. I'm not sure how they could fix it, but it's really good in Atal'Dazar to snap things. So now we've got a Reaping Wave started, a 20% Reaping Wave, and we're going to do this Reaping Wave with this Sky Screamer. On bolstering weeks in particular, doing Reaping Waves with trash is a good way to mitigate the downside of bolstering, which stops you from pulling stuff with other stuff as much. So you need to make sure that with all your Reaping Waves, basically, you're doing this. And we're actually going to pull more Sky Screamers. Each of us is going to be assigned a kick. I'm on Moon here. I set it as my focus. And we're just in the middle of this, doing some Blade Flurrying, attacking as much as we can here. And we're going to take care of these three Sky Screamers and this first Reaping Wave together. Nerf has, I think that Nerf might have the best Atal'Dazar, at least at the time, this was the best Atal'Dazar bolstering route that I'd seen. Did a really good job of not having any bad bolsters go off. And so that's part of the reason I wanted to showcase it in this video here. So yeah, three Sky Screamers go down. Not too much to worry about here. The Reaping Wave isn't too bad. There's a couple Tormented Souls in it, but it's not like one of the hard Reaping Waves that exists that's like all Tormented Souls. And Atal'Dazar is a pretty great dungeon for reaping in that there's basically no lost souls in it. There's like maybe one that you'll pull, but you actually don't even always fight that one. So that's this reanimated honor guard up here that does end up making a lost soul. So the next pull here, we're gonna do just these two mobs. We don't want to mess around with much more than this right now. The honor guard even on Tyrannical is a pretty big threat, especially with Grievous, because when it splashes that damage on everybody, it's going to start Grievous stacking onto everybody. So we just want to deal with this honor guard by itself, focus damage onto it. We don't mind if we bolster on the stalker a stack, so we don't even care about DPSing evenly here. We're just killing this honor guard. You'll see it does that Rending Maul cast, which stacks a bleed on Nerf. Generally you want to try and avoid getting the third stack here, so we either need to kill this thing or he needs to get out of there, and you'll see he's running away. And now Kinbote is parrying next to this thing. I'm parrying next to it because if we get targeted by it, we want to have parry up so that we don't get the bleed and just get killed. from the running mall there. So both Kinbote and I used our repost effects there, which is going to prevent us from being able to use them for a similar mechanic on the next pull. So that's something that we'll have to be aware of. But you can also always use Vanish against those kind of effects to stop it from targeting you a second time. Okay, so the next thing we want is some shield bearers. The 2 patrolling shield bearers over there. Unfortunately, the patrol is going far away. It would have been good if we could have rooted or distracted them when they were closer, but we ended up failing to do that this time. So here come the 2 stalkers from over there. You can pull those. It looks like Kinbote pulled them just by running up and getting into range to aggro them, or maybe he threw an engineering bomb at them. That's another way to get them. They're in stealth at the top of the stairs up there, and you can get them with an engineering bomb. So now we have shield bearers. Gouges are a great way to deal with their Bulwark of Juju. And so with 2 Outlaw Rogues in your group, you really shouldn't have a problem with those things getting their shields off for a long time. Sometimes they'll be synchronized and you can just shockwave into like leg sweep and get them both on both of their casts. But sometimes they won't be synchronized and you'll need to use single target stuff. And particularly if you get them on stun DR, which we have, you'll need to use stuff like Gouge or Blind to get that thing interrupted. You'll see there we both gouge that one. And then this one's going to end up going down before it gets its shield bash off. Shield bash does a lot of damage. If the tank is kiting, that shield bash will target other people. And that's another thing that you can parry or vanish or just not be next to it so that you don't get shield bashed. So now we're dealing with the second Reaping Wave. This is the 40% Reaping Wave. I believe that since the time of this recording, the technology of this route has further increased to the point where this Reaping Wave is actually done with a sword pull. But at the time, we were just doing this Reaping Wave by itself. And it's not the end of the world to do a Reaping Wave by itself. This is the only one in the dungeon, I think, that we do solo. It's pretty hard to work this one into other stuff being pulled at the same time, although later on we did figure out a way we could maybe do it. So, the routes are always expanding. And that's one of my favorite parts about Reaping is that it's so modular. There's so many opportunities to like do something cool with a Reaping Wave and figure out the way that you can adjust your pull so you got the Reaping Waves when you want to. It's one of the reasons that I believe Reaping is the best affix that this game has ever designed. So now we're going to shroud to the boss. You'll see there's some honor guards there with True Sight. I just distract them to the side to make sure that nobody gets caught by running a little too close to them. Now we're just going to move into this room here. Everybody gets through in the one shroud. One of the upsides of our composition here, obviously this composition is a very meta composition. This is the one that you saw everybody running at the MDI. The reason that this composition is particularly good in Atal'Dazar is that a rogue shroud out, in addition to a shroud in, is useful here. So you actually, like most dungeons, you don't actually need the second shroud for anything, and you don't need it here. We could actually get through with Ring of Peace and Distract and Sap. You can get out that way without using a second shroud, but a second shroud saves 10 seconds and makes it 100% save. So that's, there's a lot of value in doing that. When I was trying to get into the MDI doing time trials in this dungeon, we ended up only having one rogue, and it ended up causing a problem on one of our 5 attempts. We ended up losing our attempt because we pulled that pack because we messed up our skip back out without shroud. So it's definitely just a huge quality of life increase. Anyways, Volcall, Tyrannical Volcall, generally not too much of a problem because he actually kills himself based on his percent. Like he kills himself at a rate that scales with the size of the dungeon. So he deals damage to himself, and that increases with the level of the dungeon. So he's a Tyrannical boss that actually doesn't have the time it takes to kill him really increase from level to level, which is cool. But on Grievous, he actually does quite a bit of AoE damage to the group that starts stacking Grievous on everybody, and this makes him actually one of the more dangerous Grievous bosses. This is one of the few, like, the difference between Volcall non-Grievous and Volcall Grievous is it's one of the biggest boss differences with Grievous in the game. However, it's still pretty easy. I actually wouldn't say pretty easy. It's a hard boss. Venter is doing a lot of HPS right now to keep everybody alive, and a lot of it needs to be quick enough to stop those stacks from becoming a problem. You'll see I've got my Crimson Vial on cooldown, and I'll continue. I'll pretty much Vial on cooldown on this fight if I'm not topped. It's also a fight where you could consider keeping Grand Melee by itself as Outlaw for the value of the leech. I would do that depending on how safe we're looking as a group. I make that decision differently. Like if I'm not topped and I have Grievous stacks, I will keep that Grand Melee. That's what I'm doing right now. So this is a spot where you could consider doing that, because Grand Melee really is only a couple hundred DPS below the average expected value of rerolling. And if it's keeping you alive, if it means that your healer has to spend one fewer global keeping you alive, and they get to spend one extra global doing a Solar Wrath or a Sunfire or whatever, it's actually probably a DPS increase over the group to keep the Grand Melee here, and it's definitely a survivability increase. Okay, so we're coming out now. Everybody's just quickly clearing their Grievous with these sugar-crusted fish feasts. I cannot overstate how good sugar-crusted fish feast is, especially on Grievous week. If you can, you should buy those. They heal you so much faster than every other feast, and they give you a lot more mana more quickly than every other feast. So coming into this pack here, there's a stealth pack on the bridge. One of the downsides of being our composition is we don't really have a good way. We don't have a Demon Hunter to just true sight and see where they are. So we're going to pull it into this pack here. This is a hard pack. This pack is pretty worrying. It can do a lot of damage to you. The main problem is the Witch Doctors. Their Hex absolutely needs to be interrupted. You'll see there I got the Hex kick on Moon. We still need to stun the Shield Bearers or gouge them on their casts. And then we just want to use our full Between the Eyes stuns to take Witch Doctors out of the fight for as much as possible and to stop them from casting their Venom Blast. You'll see there we actually had a triangle, a kick go off on the, like one of those casts went through. I'm using Vanish here to stop Venom Blast they're targeting on me and have them redirect to somebody else and have it basically pseudo interrupt that way. And then, yeah, we're just using all of our control abilities to make sure that basically the goal is to minimize the amount of Venom Blasts that end up getting casted while not allowing any of the other bad stuff to happen, which absolutely can happen on this pull. You'll see Nerf is kiting, and we're using the ring to kite here, but Yoda goes down to the shield slam from the shield bearers, and that will target the tank if the tank is in range, but if the tank isn't in range, as I was saying earlier, it'll just target the closest person, and if that goes on a monk, they obviously don't have parry or vanish or any of the stuff that we have, or cheat death, to survive it, so... you'll see there that one's targeting me, but I ranged it before it finished its cast, so it ended up not going through. That shield bearer, shield slam, that's one of the things that you really need to be aware of when you're doing these high keys, is the abilities like shield slam. They're like, you don't really pay attention to them in lower keys, but if you're doing a high key, they're like, knowing those abilities and playing against them is the difference between a good run and a wipe. So now we're going to sap both the Sky Screamers, and we're going to snap all 10 of these swords at the same time. We're going to snap all of them to Nerf. So he's pulled some there, and I'm going to pull this pack over here. Just Blade Flurry, attack them all, and they'll all port to him, thanks to the tricks of the trade. And then we just kill them all over here. Again, it's bolstering, but the two Sky Screamers, even though one of them is in range to get bolstered, it was sapped, so it won't get bolstered onto, because it's still in that sap that was applied to it before combat started. So bolstering effects won't apply to it until that gets broken. And now we're just going to do these two Sky Screamers together. You'll also, if you notice our percentage right now, we are just about to trigger our last Reaping Wave. Razan is patrolling underneath us. So our goal is we're going to do this 60% Reaping Wave with Razan. So we're going to kill these two Sky Screamers, then we're going to jump down and fight the Reaping and Razan at the same time. This is a pretty good patrol, although it's a little bit... the patrol is about 10 seconds maybe ahead of where we'd like it to be so that we could fight Razan easily with the Reaping Wave. So now it's actually going away. It's on the other side. I'm looking down there. I'm thinking about jumping down and distracting. But it looks like we're instead we're just going to choose to play it a little bit safe. If you look at our timer right now, we're looking really good on time. 18 minutes left on the clock at this point is pretty safe. We have maybe 2 minutes of wiggle room on our timer right now. Our lust is up for this. So here comes the Reaping. We actually let our Fear kick go through on square there. That wasn't my kick. My kick was Moon. But that's okay. Whoever's kick it was, they know who they are. They messed it up. That's okay. That happens. Those go through from time to time. We're just going to do this Reaping Wave here. Our plan was to jump down and do this with Razan, but we ended up deciding that, okay, Razan isn't in a good place in his patrol to do this, so we'll just do this Reaping Wave by itself. Again, a little inefficient. We'd rather have the patrol be in a good spot, but it's not the end of the world, and we can survive it. There's Razan, and we're just going to jump down on this side and start engaging Razan. This boss is where we're going to use our second Lust of the dungeon. Part of the reason that we liked doing this with Reaping is because it meant that we could use our Lust with a boss in Reaping. So obviously you get 3 lusts in this dungeon. We use our first one on the first trash pull of the dungeon. Your last one is committed to being used on Yasma, which means you have to use your second one pretty much on cooldown-ish. You have like a 3-minute window to use it around this time. I mean, you could use it a little bit later, but then you wouldn't have it for Yasma on pull. But yeah, that's why we choose to use it on this boss encounter. Okay, so you'll see me there. I ran out and I got targeted by the Pursuit, and then I vanished. Pursuit is a mechanic that is misunderstood on Razan. Here's the way it works. It will target, as long as there are at least 2 people outside of Razan's hitbox, it will target one of them for sure. If there's only one person outside Razan's hitbox, it can target anybody. And if there's... So what you want to do is you want to have your healer and a rogue, generally, go outside of melee range so that it can target them. Any rogue that has Vanish available, like I do, so I have Vanish available here. No people didn't actually go out and bait, but luckily it did target me. Ideally you want your healer and a rogue to go out, or maybe both rogues, because you'd rather not have it go on like Yoda here, who's playing a monk. If he gets pursued there, he's just going to do no damage for the duration of the pursuit, and that's a problem. Whereas if it goes on one of us, if it's the healer, they can just kite, they lose a little bit of damage, and if it goes on the rogue, we can just vanish. When you vanish, you need to wait until the pursuit cast finishes channeling up, and then vanish. So I see a lot of people vanish immediately when they get targeted by pursuit, and that's bad. You need to wait until it actually finishes this pursuit cast right now. So this 3-second cast, now you could vanish. Although it's going on nerf, so obviously he can't vanish because he is playing a warrior and we're horde side. If this were Tournament Realm, he could Shadow Meld this as well, but obviously it's not Tournament Realm, it's live. So that's not an option. We would have to go Alliance to do that, and we're not going to do that. So yeah, that's how the boss gets done. If the tank is in danger of dying, like if they're running out of mitigation and stuff, it can actually be ideal to not have a rogue get targeted, because when the boss is doing pursuit, it's not doing tank damage, and if the tank is low on mitigation, it might make sense to just do a pursuit cycle where the boss is doing no damage. We can, Nerf is sufficiently expert to make that call as needed, but it didn't end up being necessary this time. So, what other things can I discuss about the Razan encounter? One thing you can do on this fight is you can pull Raptors. Pulling Raptors is a single target increase for the rogues because of Keep Your Wits About You. But it's a pretty small single target increase. It's nice, but it is a pretty serious tank damage increase to do that. And on a 24 Tyrannical, that's a little bit high for us to want to do. So we're not doing it. But it could be done, and it's a good strategy for lower keys. If you're trying to 2-chest this key on like an 18 or whatever, it's an absolutely recommended strategy that I would try and do. Also, you can cloak the fear there, so that's a good thing to try and do. Oh, one thing I also didn't remember about this pursuit is if you screw up and you vanish early, you can actually still be okay. So the way Vanish works is that you vanish, you get this empowered stealth for a couple seconds, and then at the end of those couple seconds, Vanish turns into regular stealth. So if you haven't taken a hostile action, like fired a pistol shot or whatever at the boss, between when you vanished and a couple seconds later when the Vanish buff falls off, you will transition into regular stealth. And that will actually also stop the pursuit from being on you. So if you screw up and you vanish early, just make sure you run away from the boss, don't break your vanish, and you'll transition to a regular stealth, and that will also break the pursuit on you. So that's a little trick. If you do it at the wrong time, you can still be okay. All right, so Razan going down now. It's kind of annoying that we're going in this direction. We'd rather be over where we just were when the boss died. This is going to add 15 seconds of running to our route, which we're not happy about, but that's okay. We'll live with it. We've got a pack of swords that we need to kill down here before we can progress further through the dungeon. I think the plan that we talked about after this was we wanted to do these swords with that second Reaping Wave, and that would mean that we could then do the third Reaping Wave with those 2 Sky Screamers upstairs, or with one of them perhaps, instead of having to try and potentially do it with Razan. So that's potentially an update you can make to this route, and that would also mean that you don't have to do this weird thing where you kill this pack of 5 swords and then mount up again, and it's a little bit of this strange, weirdness. Oh my god, hosted by Shakib while he's doing this. That's cool. I've forgotten about that. Shout out to Shakib. All right, so now we're doing this further snap strat. We're getting through that. If you saw there, one thing I did there is I sapped. Let's go back and let's slow motion replay this thing. You'll see this Skyscreamer up here. Outlaw Rogues, because of the Acrobatic Strikes talent, actually have enough range to sap this thing. So you'll see I target it, and as we go by, I jump and sap and land the sap on the Skyscreamer. It's not necessary, but that's a little thing that can make it so that it doesn't accidentally aggro at weird times. And then we move here. I update my sap to that thing. And we do the same snap strategy where we're snapping 9 swords to nerf all at once. Kill them all evenly, and then we're going to fight 3 Skyscreamers together. And yeah, this is the nerf bolstering strategy I really like. Taking care of all the swords while taking care of multiple packs of swords while the Screamers are CC'd, using these snap spots that swords can't path to, so they'll just teleport to you while you're standing on them. So yeah, now it's time to do a bunch of Sky Screamers together. Once again, I'm the Moon Kick, so I focus my Moon marker. We're going to do these swords, potentially, in a little bit. Once Nerf gets some threat, and we're actually going to pull them further along. We're going to pull them into this 4-pack here, because the Sky Screamers themselves don't do too much damage. We have kicks for them. The 2 Augur casts once they get stunned. Okay, the Dazari Augurs here, they do this. They have this weird behavior where they will actually not keep casting as long as you're in melee range of these Augurs. They won't keep casting Wildfire. So one problem I see is there are some weeks where tanks will kite these Augurs, and then they'll start free casting and murdering everybody. When you pull these Augurs, you need to make sure that you can stand in and just tank them. So that they don't start free casting, or you have to assign kicks to them. But obviously you can't do this pull where you have 3 committed kicks to Sky Screamers if you are then going to plan to have to kick Augurs. It's just not going to work. There are not enough kicks to do that. So that's why we do the strategy of standing next to the Augurs so that they don't keep casting. I don't know why these behave that way. They're different from the other Augurs, but there you go. That's the behavior. That's how these Augurs work. Now we've got these fiery stare things, and we're about to trigger Reaping Wave number 4. trying to kill these things evenly for both bolstering and for reaping wave purposes. A little bit scuffed, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. They all got into that reaping wave anyway, which is kind of the important thing. Now we're just going to kill this reaping wave here. I see groups take this reaping wave upstairs. The problem with that is there's not like an easy pull that you can pull this reaping wave onto when you head upstairs. Like you could maybe pull a priestess or two, but you could just do those priestesses with the next pull anyway. And you can't realistically do the big pull with this reaping wave. I mean, most of the time that I see people attempt to do that, they wipe. So this is another reaping wave that I think the best thing to do with this reaping wave is just like kill it. When it's low, when it's all grouped up, you can start slowly making your way upstairs. That's fine to get through the fire breathers on a good timing. A tip for these fire things is if you're especially between those top two, sometimes there's very little space between where you'll get killed. So one thing you can do is you can turn your camera to the side and look at the torch, and as long as you're right in line with that torch, you're gonna live. Okay, big pull time. Both the priestesses pulled from the side, and then we're gonna attack this. Venter, you see here, running out to the side, he's going to bait the Juggernaut charges. One thing you can do is you can have your Resto Druid or your healer, whatever class they end up being, go stand on the edge of the stairs. So it's hard to show it, but like way to the south, you can actually run up to the spot where the Juggernauts won't be able to charge you. But we elect not to do that. We just have the Venter just bait the charges outside. It's a little bit finicky to get up there, and it's not necessarily worth it because it means that you're kind of less flexible. Like he can't chase it. Like if we move out of his range, which some of us would be where we're standing right now, there's no way he could heal us easily. So it's if they can dodge the Juggernauts, I think it's a little better if your healer doesn't stand up there. But if they don't want to deal with that, it's totally fine. You'll see there I naturally dodged that Juggernaut when it charged at me there. That's really good. Otherwise I'm probably that's probably taking my cheat death. So that was lucky. The Juggernaut will charge you if it charges anybody who's not directly in melee with it, and I obviously wasn't directly in melee with it at that time there, even though I was still able to attack it with my melee abilities. That's just because I'm an Outlaw rogue. And yeah, here we are, we're hitting 100% on enemy forces, and we're going to take this Reaping Wave into the boss. At the time of this recording, this boss is not particularly hard, although we've actually just seen some PTR changes that suggest that next season it's going to get some pretty serious buffs. But as it stands right now, this boss is really low threat, so it's very safe to just do this with a full Reaping Wave. The boss doesn't really do anything, just dies, relatively safely. So, got some nice soda here to keep my voice alive. You may have heard it ran into some difficulties a little bit earlier, so sorted that out. I re-augment rune here because my augment rune fell off, and I have a little tracker for that. It keeps me aware of that. So yeah, Priestess Alunza, pretty easy boss, particularly with this composition. We have Yoda's Incap, we have Venter's Root, and we have 2 Rogue Blinds. You want to use the Root and the Incap on the first 2, and then you can blind the last 2 spirits, because Blind obviously can't be reapplied. It has a longer cooldown than its duration, whereas Root and Incap don't have that problem. So yeah, Alunza will do 25% of her health every time she casts Transfusion. So Alunza, like Volkal, is a boss that does not take much longer. Like it's the length of time of the Alunza fight does not increase per level at the same rate that every other boss fight in this game does. And that's part of the reason that Atal'Dazar is such a good Tyrannical dungeon, is that 2 of the 4 bosses just actually don't take that much longer on Tyrannical, like every other dungeon has bosses that do. You'll see that I went and got my blind. Alunza's at 25% health, which means now it's safe. If I pick up when I pick up my blood, I can just run down the stairs and start the RP. Looks like Kinbote is already off to do that, or Venter is, or somebody. No, Yoda's running to do that right now. So he's doing it. You see him on the map. He's going to go start the RP early for the last boss. We all have the the corrupted blood. So again, 25% is the amount of health that you need. If everybody has corrupted blood, she does 25% per transfusion. If one person doesn't, though, it does a lot less damage. So you need to be really careful and make sure that everybody gets that blood. Okay, so all the enemy forces are taken care of. All that's left is to deal with Yasma, the last boss here. Yasma is a hard boss in here. I don't actually think it's harder than Volkal on a numbers side. I think Volkal is the hardest boss in here this week on numbers-wise because of the Grievous that was active. But Yasma is definitely, like, there's a lot of opportunities to make a mistake with the spirits and just wipe the raid pretty easily that way. And there's a lot of personal responsibility in dodging spiders. And there's a lot of, like, strategic decisions. Like, you can get yourself cut off pretty easily. Anyways, we're going to start attacking Yasma now. And this fight, pretty simple. There's a kick that needs to happen on the boss. We don't actually have any ranged kicks in this group, so one thing that can happen is the boss can get in a spot where nobody can easily get to it to ranged kick it, or to melee kick it. One other further nice thing about our composition is we have a Ring of Peace. we can just go like, we can alternate ring a piece leg sweep for every set of ads, and that means we can take them pretty close to the boss. That's going to be a pretty big increase in damage to the boss. If you don't have access to those kind of abilities that will take care of those spirits and stop them from getting into the boss quickly, you're going to be put in this position where you lose a lot of damage because you're taking the spirits far away from Miasma, and that's bad. Whereas what we get to do is we get to just cleave onto them and use our Blade Flurries, do a bunch of damage to everything, and not lose any single target damage when we do the Soul Binds, or the Soul Rend, rather. Again, here are calls which can be made. It doesn't really matter where we take these. We want to take them pretty close to the boss so that we can Blade Flurry onto them off of the boss. And yeah, we start with a leg sweep there, and because we have 2 Outlaw Rogues and a Windwalker that also does pretty good AoE, depending on if they have Fist of Fury available at that time, or a Dance of Chi-Ji proc. Those things just go down. I think that Yoda is mostly just focusing on single target and just letting us Outlaw Rogues deal with cleaving down those ads. So yeah, Miasma being handled, moving around the room. You'll see that the spiders are being pretty well handled. The goal when you're moving Miasma is you want to keep all the spiders in the same place. So your goal is to move in such a way that you clump the spiders together. It's difficult to explain exactly how you do that, but and a lot of tanks don't really understand how to do that. But basically, it's small, controlled, and frequent movements that will cause the spiders to do this. And you want to make sure you don't get yourself in a position where you're moving too quickly around the room, because if we were up here right now, we'd have spiders in the middle of the room that were really close to us. But by slowly moving a little bit each time, we're keeping these spiders in this great clump that is going to stop them from taking up too much of the room. It's going to stop them from denying much of the space. Something that sometimes people, when I'm streaming, people always suggest I do is I activate my cloak and I soak these spiders. Generally, I think that's a mistake because that actually denies more of the room. Like, you're not going to get all the spiders, so you're still going to have a bunch of spiders, and really, the difference between having 50 spiders active and having 10 spiders active is not that big. If there are any spiders, it's kind of the same. Like, this clump of spiders is equally lethal, even if there were a third as many spiders. So if I clear out some spiders and there are still enough spiders for there to be a lethal clump, I'm not really helping, but there will be these awful puddles that slow you down and do a lot of damage wherever I cleared, and those will stay there and pollute the room and reduce the amount of space in the room. So I think it's important to, like, you only want to cloak and soak these things if you can get, like, all of them, or if you really need to. Like, if you need to get from point A to point B and there's spiders between you and point B, and you need to activate your cloak to do it, then, you got to do what you got to do, but that's how that works. So one thing that I didn't really discuss is the failure case of what happens if these spirits reach the boss, because it's not necessarily a wipe. Like, I think Venture has handled one spirit hitting the boss on this size key. I'm pretty sure I've done a key with him where that's happened and we still killed the boss. You can use Cloak of Shadows to immune damage ticks from the dot that happens. Basically, when an ad reaches the boss, it explodes for a huge, like, 20-second dot on everybody in the group. That dot does a ton of damage. But you can Cloak of Shadows and immune ticks of the dot. It doesn't actually remove the dot from you, but you'll take 0 damage from the ticks while you have the cloak up. So you'll want to get kind of low and then cloak, and then by the time your cloak is over, you'll be full health again, and then hopefully you survive, and you use your health stones, you use your everything to try and survive that. But obviously it's generally a failure case. You'll see people die if that happens. One thing you need to be ready for as the rogue in this composition is, like, you want your engineering battle res to be ready for if Venture dies. Or if Nerf dies, you want to just get a quick res, because Venture probably doesn't have a global free to cast Rebirth if in that situation where everybody's being hit by that huge dot. Anyways, very long boss fight. I've pretty much run out of stuff that useful stuff I can say. Again, Nerf is really, you can see why he's an MDI champion. Just great movement to the boss. Spiders very well managed. Soul Rend's always being taken to a nice intelligent spot, handled with a ring of peace or a leg sweep. That's one of the hallmarks. One of the reasons that Mistweaver is actually, or not Mistweaver, but Monk, Windwalker in this case, although Mistweaver has it too, is that mob control that they have. And for fights like this, it's night and day actually having a Monk versus not having one. So there we go, dungeon down. At the time, this was one of the best Atal'Dazar runs that was out there. 28-minute level 24 Atal'Dazar. This was a couple months ago, so since then, this dungeon's been done as high as 26, I think. So no longer all that cool, but it was very cool at the time, and I felt like when I was looking through my clips to make a video of, this was one of the cooler runs, so figured I'd share that. I hope you've all enjoyed this. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, like it and subscribe to my channel and that stuff, and thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.